Okay. Oh, I can already tell wearing this shirt is going to be a mistake because it's like the loudest piece of clothing I own, and I know the camera is going to catch every movement, but maybe it'll help me not to fidget so much. What's up, folks? Spiderfly back again on the World Wide Web. Yeah, you know the drill by this point. If you're one of my 10 subscribers, guys, 10 subscribers. Let's go. That's like, I don't know. That's like, I could barely fit that many people in this room. So there you go. Look at that. Huge W. We did the launch party the other day. That was cool. Lots of people came down. It was a fun time. Had a lot to drink. One guy threw up. One of the 10 subscribers threw up 3 times. You know who you are. Shout out to you. Yeah, everyone came down. It was a good time. The place who hosted it, Must Be the Place, shout out Must Be the Place, said it was some of the best food sales they'd done since they opened. And I did not sell one single copy. So at least some of us made some money, right? But yeah, another video. We're on to section 7, Long Way from St. Kansas. It's a Wizard of Oz reference. Did you get that? You wouldn't get that because I haven't even made the map yet. Capital of Frag is called St. Kansas, okay? I met a couple once bartending there from, this is a side note, met a couple once they were in town while I was bartending there from Kansas City, and they were complaining about how nothing cool ever happened in Kansas City, and I had to stop myself from telling them, well, you know what? In my fictional book, your city's the capital of the free world. Okay, I wanted to give them that shout out, but they wouldn't have got it. Okay, yeah, section 7. What's section 7 about? This is one of the more kind of self-explanatory chapters, so I'm about to say I'm not going to spend too much time on it, and I can already guarantee that you're going to look down at the watch time on this video, and it's going to be over 40 minutes. God damn it. Can't keep getting away with it. Yeah, no, this is the chapter on travel. It's about walking around. See the art? This is a cool artwork. Boom. Friesen did that. Look at that. Beautiful. Anyway, such a disaster of a video already. Yeah, so what is section 7 about? It kind of just talks about, it's a lot more of a lore chapter, honestly. It's a lore chapter in disguise. It just talks about, like, kind of what the world will kind of look like as you're traversing and engaging with it. It's a lot more helpful as, like, a zone master. This is, like, actually a good zone master chapter. There's not enough of them in the book, which is a big part of why I want to make this YouTube channel, is just to talk about how do you run this game, right? Yeah, this chapter is just about, walking around, doing things. Most of it's pretty straightforward. There's a couple things that got expanded really, really significantly in the expansion. Because the chapter in the base book is like, it doesn't take a lot of time with it. I spent a lot more time kind of working out how to do this better in the expansion. I'll definitely do videos in the future about like how I do this at my own games and stuff like that. But yeah, for now, we'll just jump into it. We'll just jump right in. So the first bits are about how you traverse, how people in the Rotten World get around, right? Because travel, and really like a lot of things, politics, geography, borders, countries, they don't really work the same way they do in our world, just because the vast majority of the world is completely uninhabitable. You cannot go there without dying. And so how people get around is a bit different. I'll just do the quick speed run. Air travel. Most places don't have the real estate available for planes to be viable, and there are not enough places for planes to refuel on journeys for them to be very useful. So planes don't get a whole lot of use. Things like helicopters and in the game they're called raptors, because every cyberpunk-inspired thing needs a vertical takeoff and landing vehicle of some kind. Those are mainly for short distances. Really, the only form of long-distance air travel that is like commercially viable are Zeppelins. Zeppelins made a big comeback in this world. They're called air frigs or air frigates, which sounds like a bad word when I say it now. But yeah, air travel not common. Why? Because I didn't think it was that cool. I didn't want to waste that much time with it. By sea. This is how most things get around, most people get around as far as like internationally. You're going to want to take a boat. Boats are probably the safest way to get around. You do have a lot of piracy because you don't have, world superpowers policing the international waters anymore. Like, we kind of take for granted how much of our international supply chain revolves around the fact that the US will just drop the Navy SEALs on like anybody who fucks around. This isn't Navy SEAL propaganda or anything. I think it's just interesting how like our global supply chain now is so precarious that like one little disruption in like the biggest military on the planet is like, okay, send out the kill team. Send in the kill team. We can't lose. They took an oil ship. Send in the kill team. Kill everyone. And they'll do that. And that's how we it's why there's no piracy really anymore, is they just have international hit squads being sent out by the US. They don't have that anymore. So there's a lot of piracy. Usually, and so really like the one form of shipping that's immune to that are what are called the dreadnoughts. These are giant corporate like battleships essentially, which double as cargo ships, and they are gigantic, basically self-sufficient. A lot of them have like nuclear reactors on board powering them and stuff like that. And no pirates getting that. No pirates getting through all those guns. But outside of that, it's relatively safe. There are canonically, I don't think this is mentioned in the core rulebook at all, but there are canonically giant sea monsters in the Geto Ratz universe. So you do have to look out for like a kraken or a giant mutant whale or something sinking your ship on top of the pirates. And, there are waterborne twisters. There's panther sharks. There are things that'll kill you. There's orcas are probably called like murder whales or something like that, because that's just a very much a Geto Ratz naming convention. But yeah, ocean, that's how most people get around. That's how most like shipping happens that is not by land. This is what I get for sleeping with my window open. All the wildfire smoke. I'm smoking 100 packs of cigarettes a night while I'm sleeping. Just breathing the wildfires in. Love Canada. Anyway. So by land. This is the important one. This is the one worth mentioning. You're going to get a better idea of this when I finally release the next expansion. I just wrote the first paragraph of it, so coming soon, basically. That one talks a lot more, is going to be a lot more about like the different cities. I'm going to get a map done, hopefully. The different political parties and stuff like that. Because that's what everyone wanted more of, was lore. But you're going to kind of get more of an idea of this then, of like how big of a deal trains are. In the game, they're these super souped up Mad Max hell trains are called mega rails. And the mega rails are basically, I don't know if you've ever seen those like World War I battle trains. It's like those on steroids. They're like triple decker cargo trains. They'll have like train cars for people that have like 3 floors, 4 floors on them. They've got huge cannons and machine guns and like armored nests all throughout the place. That's how most cargo, like mass corporate cargo, is going to be shipped. They've got treads just in case you blow up the train line, and a lot of what the U.S. military does at this point, the Interior Security Forces or the ISF, right? Most of their job, like probably 80% of their job, is just patrolling the train lines. Because if those train lines go down, there's not many of them. Like, I'm sure you can, it was hard enough doing, like, what do they call it? The Pan American Rail, or the whatever that first, Hell on Wheels. Hell on Wheels. You know how hard it was just to build train lines in, like, Wild West times, right? From one side of the continent to the other. The idea of maintaining one with, like, twisters and warlords and, like, fighting kin tribes with the ISF battalions and stuff. These railroads are very difficult to maintain, almost impossible. And so, there's very few of these train lines. One train line is a huge undertaking just to build, let alone to maintain it. But it's worth it for how much money it makes the railroad companies, and makes the railroad companies very, very powerful. Oh my god, this video is like unusable. What is wrong with me today? Okay, so you've got the railroads. All well and good. But the way that a lot of stuff is going to get from point A to point B, especially things in the zone, is through a more clandestine network called the Old Roads. What are the Old Roads? The Old Roads aren't really a real thing. They're kind of just a catch-all term for the kind of underground highways and, like, illegal smuggling routes which cut across the old continent. So if you want to get from one city to the next, and you have your cargo, let's say it's like a backpack full of, various supplies. It could be like antibiotics or water purifiers, or it could really be anything, right? You want to get from point A to point B. You don't want to pay taxes on it. You can't afford to send it on a train. Maybe it's illegal and you don't have contacts in a caravan company. Maybe you're with a caravan company. It doesn't matter. You have to get from point A to point B. And the way to do that in the feedlands is always going to be changing, right? Going to have ghost radiation blowing around, twister nests popping up and being purged and then popping up again. You're going to have bandit encampments. You're going to have highwayman gangs moving through the area. The kin might be setting up there. There might be a huge battle with the ISF happening. Old unexploded ordnance like artillery shells and landmines and stuff like that. It is very, very dangerous to travel around, right? And so every person that does this is going to know you're going to plot a route. And that route is going to involve old safe houses and hideouts. It's going to involve maybe you travel underground through this section, and then this building collapses, so you can access the underground parking lot, and then a wall there has been knocked down that lets you into a sewer line, and that'll take you X amount of the way till you get to here, and then you can follow through this old subway. It's the idea that there are different shortcuts and paths. Some of them are safe, some of them are not. And what is safe and what isn't is always changing. And so the knowledge of what the safest and fastest route is, that's what the old roads are. It's navigating all of this failed infrastructure, and as it changes and evolves, your path evolves with it. So the caravan companies, or the convoys, are kind of the next best thing after the railroads. If you can't bring it through a railroad because the railroad companies are gouging you, you send it with the caravans. And the caravans just go by land, big fleets of vehicles, groups of people, sometimes with pack animals and stuff like that, like run below and things like that. which you won't know what those are. I don't even think those are in the DLC yet. Shout out the Rundalo, engineered animal. Love those guys. But yeah, anyway. They're kind of the next best thing, getting things from point A to point B. You want to bring illegal things overland. You've got the highwayman gangs, sort of like biker bandit hybrids. And you've got, various smugglers and salvagers and things like that. Long story short, navigating the Feedlands is dangerous, but you got to do what you got to do. Then talks about how to get around in the zone. It's just stuff like, monorails and wheelmen, kind of like cab companies. You've got the internet. It breaks down how the internet works. Long story short, there isn't much of one. There will be regional internets, like each city is going to have its own internet. But there's going to be basically no communication outside of that. There would be like telegram or phone lines running over the railroads, possibly. Certain rail lines might have a telegraph or a telephone line. Those things are going to get cut or disrupted like every other day. So not a reliable form of communication at all. If you are very lucky, you might be able to send a message or a phone call through. Not likely. Most phones operate, and most of the internet infrastructure operates just on like glorified radio frequencies. Like most cell phones in Geto Ratz are just glorified walkie-talkies with all kind of the fixings we might associate with a phone, or sometimes none of the fixings, but it's really just radios. It's really just radio phones. There are satellite phones. They are not common. All the space garbage makes it hard. It's so expensive to put a satellite in space, but some of the corporations have them. If you were unimaginably wealthy, you might have a phone where you can phone any other phone connected to that satellite. So if there's 100 phones connected to one satellite, you'd be able to call any of those other phones anywhere on Earth. But again, it's like a lot of people communicate with letters sent with caravan companies across the country through the wastelands. Like it's really hard to stay in touch. Which is why so many communities are so isolated and culturally are so distinct, because they have very little interaction with the outside world most of the time. So the next section, this is the one that's actually important. I was just rambling through that last one because it doesn't really matter all that much. I guess it matters a lot. It's just lore. It's just like lore stuff. This is where it actually gets more important, and that is the districts of the Cosmoplex. How do you build your city? So let's talk about it. Sorry to my 10 subscribers. This might be the worst video I've ever recorded. Can't even breathe. So congested. I don't know why. I feel like I just seem like I'm coked out. I'm just like sniffling and rambling. I have no idea what I'm saying. Yeah. So the districts. Building your own zone. Building your own zone. This is something that I'm gonna do its own video on in the future. I want to do a video series where I go through a step-by-step of how I design districts and unique locations, how I populate them with locations and NPCs and that kind of thing, and do it as a step-by-step, and then maybe if I have the resources to do it, like release it as a free DLC or something, or like a pay what you want DLC or something like that. Just so people kind of get the idea, because the whole point with this game, I included an adventure at the end of this book with its own location and stuff like that. But the idea is that you make your own. And so the whole system of how I describe the different types of districts are rooted in this idea that you're using them as building pieces to populate your own setting and build it from the ground up. Is it a lot of work? as a zone master, yeah, but it kind of, even though you're playing in a pre-existing world, it's like, okay, here are all the tools to build your own setting. The idea was that I wanted, even though there's going to be a canon map that comes out with canon cities and stuff like that, I wanted people to, create their own cities in the world of Geto Ratz. Like, maybe Gaylord, Michigan inexplicably survived the end of the world, and now it's a bustling megacity. Why the hell not, right? Like, this is just kind of a tool set to do that. Okay, so first things first, the Havens. What are the Havens? The Havens are the wealthiest part of any city. They are restricted to Class A citizens only. So you essentially have to be born in the Plex, particularly into a pretty good family, in order to ever even have a shot at living there. What do they look like? They are such wealthy places that they kind of don't have one uniform style or aesthetic. Certain places might look like contemporary, like glittering designer condos with, rooftop gardens and like crazy glass facades and stuff like that. Some of them might look like castles and cathedrals and these giant, like sprawling estates. One thing almost all of them are gonna have are yards, which is something almost inconceivable to the average person in the Plex. The idea of using land for nothing but decorative kind of stuff is pretty nuts, especially when it's only one family owning all that property. So yeah, that would be a big thing for sure. As for security, you've got like usually checkpoints policed by like private military companies. Every family's gonna have their own security. It is a pretty dangerous place to try and do anything in. Any mission which is going to happen in the Havens is almost off the bat a suicide run. It's almost never going to go well. Just getting into the Havens is borderline impossible. So doing any kind of mission, the amount of prep and connections you would need to call in just to get there, let alone getting out or pulling the job off, would be absolutely insane. But, why say no to a challenge, right? The Havens are some of the least developed because this is the other thing, too, with the way that the system works. The least amount of information is on the places you're going to be visiting the least. By playing Geto Ratz, you kind of almost sign up. You almost sign a deal that says, I will never be in the Havens. Maybe your campaign will involve it. Odds are your campaign will not. Odds are your players will never go there. And so the Havens are better almost as like this idea. So like in the Havens in one of the cities I run, they have this statue called the Hand of God. And it is one giant marble hand that's like almost like a skyscraper size. And it was sculpted by this guy who claimed that he saw literally the hand of God in a dream and then sculpted it, and it is like this ginormous hand. So if you look at the city skyline, there's a huge marble hand reaching for the clouds. There's a building literally called the Ivory Tower, which is this giant bone white mega building that houses all of the city's elite of the elite. There's a pyramid. The Druidic Order has a giant pyramid in the city. It's just things like that, right? So when it comes to the Havens, just get ridiculous. Like the most outlandish kind of stuff. Build it up as this absurd idea of just like what even is wealth? What do you even do with this amount of power and influence, right? Like maybe this one guy owns a mega building and this one guy lives in a collapsing church and this other guy has a castle and a sprawling estate. A lot of people are going to have compounds. Like, there was one place they did where it was like this big family estate with a huge mansion and this sprawling lakefront area. And they had like fish that would clean, they would eat all the garbage in the polluted water, so there was just up here an exact box of lake that was completely clean, almost clear, and the rest of it was gross polluted waters. They had sand which was heated, and it would stick to you and soak up the water on you and then fall off. So you could lay on the sand, you could be in the water and lay on the sand, and it would be warm, heated sand, and then when you got off, you would be completely dry and there'd be no sand on you. Who knows how that works? They're rich, right? That's the idea. They had built small, quaint, medieval peasant villages on their sprawling estate where all of the help and the workers lived in, and they were patrolled with like armed gunmen on golf carts with hairless cyber dogs stalking the area, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to make sense. Just like the most absurd, ridiculous, over-the-top displays of wealth. So even when your players catch just a glimpse, it's like going to be absolutely jaw-dropping, because they spend 99% of the game in complete poverty, right? Yeah, the Havens, you don't gotta overthink it. Any ridiculous idea you have is probably gonna fly. They don't have one universal aesthetic. And also the aesthetics of the rich and powerful, they're gonna change constantly, right? Like what's trendy, what's not, is always gonna be evolving. It's a constant arms race of fashion and stuff. In the book, it talks about like rich people dressing up their bodyguards in designer, so like having like a Balenciaga shotgun and like Louis Vuitton combat boots and stuff like that, the Gucci ballistic vest. These kinds of things would be like, that would be common because you want to flex, right? You see that in the weapons too. Like a lot of corporate officers or executives carry like rapiers. Corporate guards are going to be carrying halberds and stuff like that. They're going to be wearing plate mail, like titanium plate mail with Kevlar mesh just as much as they will be a bulletproof vest, right? So get ridiculous, get insane, have fun with it. Unimaginable wealth, you're not welcome there. That's really all you need to know. Okay, next up, the communities, right? This is what makes up the majority of the Plex. Once you get behind the wall, you've got those exclusive Havenite areas. But most of it's made up of what is called the communities. And these are just kind of like administrative, residential, and like business districts. This is where the majority of people in the cities are going to live, right? And so you're going to have, usually they're divided into like Class B and Class C districts. All that means is, I guess I never actually talked about it in the character creation video. There's sort of a caste system. It doesn't really matter that much. It just boils down to what kind of citizenship you have. Everyone's a citizen, but not all citizens are created equal, right? And so B class just means that your citizenship is provided by a political party or sponsored by a political party. So you usually work in some kind of civil service role, whether that's as a doctor or a teacher or, any kind of administrative type figure. Even if you're just like a party loyalist and you work in like for a bigger company or something. It just means, you have the right to rent in certain areas, and they're usually all areas shared by kind of the same political parties and stuff. So different parties might have different neighborhoods or sections of the city or whatever. Good luck if you lose an election. Then a lot of them, though, are what are called C-class neighborhoods. These are for the C-class citizens or the Caspers, and they are the people that have their citizenship provided by a corporation or a wealthy family. They are employees. They're usually paid with corporate currency. In the case of most people in the frag, this is going to be Unicred. It is the cryptocurrency that was agreed to be the universal currency paid by all the big American oligarch families to their employees. It is well on its way to replacing the Amero dollars, the official currency. You live in corporate provided housing, you eat corporate provided food. Generally, you take on a debt for your training and for your equipment, uniform, those kinds of things. And then you have work quotas to make up. Making those quotas are going to cover the cost of housing you, of feeding you, of doing the same for your family, putting your kids through corporate college while you're working. That's all coming out of your paycheck. And you have to work to hit those quotas. And everything above your quota that you do, that's where you get paid corporate credit, which you can spend on, the newest clothes, going to the movies that the media combines have given to you, etc. You get your bugs and you get to eat them too. It's perfect. It's a great time. The communities are pretty boring. There's not a lot to talk about with them, and that's another reason why you don't have to spend a lot of time. I always kind of get that question, like people sometimes say like, oh, the zone sucks, but like living in the communities low-key sounds worse. And it's an interesting take because like in most pieces of media, I would agree with you. That's a motif you see a lot of, like the prince who feels trapped in his role and responsibilities and his arranged marriages and, oh, I have all the wealth in the world, but am I really free? And then you might have the farm girl who's like, oh, I live in poverty and whatever, but at least I can do what I want. And I don't think that's true at all in Geto Ratz. I think living in the zone is objectively so awful. I don't think it's not really meant to be an allegory of like, but are we truly free? It's like, no, we're truly not free. There are gangs running around with chain guns shooting each other to death over selling methamphetamine analog in the slums. Like, this is not the same thing at all. Oh no, I'm not really poor. I'm just living paycheck to paycheck. It's like, yeah, no shit. There are twister attacks. Monsters eat people outside of the wall. It's not the same thing, okay? Just because you get to live inside the wall, it doesn't mean your life is great. Your freedoms are restricted, and that sucks, but this is not some narrative of like, maybe I'll go to the zone and I'll meet all my real friends there. No, you're gonna get eaten. They're gonna eat you. You're literally gonna be eaten by monsters. Like, this is not that. But it does kind of boil into this territory of like, yeah, things in the wall aren't great. The corporations do not treat you well. When your citizenship and your place in society depends on being subservient to either a political faction or a corporation, things are not really good. Otherwise, you have to be born into your role at the top of society. That sucks. But the quality of life is still infinitely better, right, than anything you're going to find in the zone. And I don't know. I mean, okay, this is something where I feel conflicted now. Because now the next step is we go outside the wall. So inside the wall, you have your A-class districts, or your havens. You've got your B and C-class districts, or the communities. And we don't spend much time at all in these places, so we don't have to waste a lot of time describing them. These are the parts of the map where you fill in with catchy and interesting names, but you don't really put a lot of locations in, because odds are your characters are never going there. That's kind of the point of the wall. is it creates just this super obvious, really easy to wrap your head around visual kind of metaphor of there are the insiders and the outsiders. There are the people that are born in the wall or the people that live in the wall, and there's us who live outside the wall. Maybe your character in their past, was from the Plex. Maybe they were a Havenite who was exiled for a horrible crime. Maybe they were a C-class citizen who was framed by their boss for their embezzlement and they got kicked out. Maybe they were in a B-class, but an election reshuffle left them, as no longer a priority citizen and they lost their citizenship. It doesn't matter. There's the people inside the wall, there's us on the outside of the wall, and we're all looking up at the same wall at the end of the day. It's all these people starving and dying in the zone, and they're looking up at this wall and imagining what could be on the other side of it. That's the idea. Does it work? Yeah, it's pretty obvious. It's pretty self-explanatory. It kind of sums up a lot of the themes of the game pretty easily. Gives you a very clear and obvious objective. Most people want to get in the wall at the end of the day. That's the end goal, and it's right there, and you just can't quite reach it, right? But what it also does is it divides your setting into essentially a playable area and a non-playable area. It's like when I was playing Star Wars Battlefront 2 last night because it was on sale for like $5. And side note, I used to love the old version of that game when I was a kid. It was like one of my favorite video games. I swear the graphics look the exact same, like how I remember it versus the EA version. In my head, they look the same. But when you're on a map and you're like, oh, I want to flank and go to the objective that way, and you go, and then it's like, get back to the playable area. You're gonna die. You can't be here. It does that to your setting. And on one hand, it's nice because what I'll do is I'll take the layout of a real city and then I will slightly rename the different neighborhoods just a little bit. And then all the areas I don't really care to flesh out become communities. The more isolated places like islands or more centralized areas become havens. And then I only explore the areas I'm actually interested in playing in, right? And on one hand, it makes it really, really easy to tackle the project of doing an entire city because the majority of the city, you don't really have to worry about your players going there. And so you don't really have to spend much time or any time at all fleshing it out. You really only have to worry about the zone. And if you're doing a mission that takes place in the city, then you can flesh out that mission area. It can be one estate or one building or something. But you don't have to know what shops are on what corner. You don't have to have named NPCs or anything like that. It doesn't matter because they're not going there. And you know that and they know that. It's the finish line, but once they pass the finish line, it's over, right? So you don't have to flesh it out. But what it does lead to is, I don't know, it kind of limits to what you're able to do in the long term. And so it might be something I change in a future edition of the game, kind of breaking down those barriers of you can play here, you can't play there. I do like the idea of fleshing out one continuous city where poverty and wealth are kind of side by side. It isn't, there's the poor areas, the okay areas, and then the rich areas. It's one kind of big melting pot. I think that is cool to explore. There are a couple cities in canon that don't have zones, and so they're more like that. There's some cities in the canon where there might not even be communities. It might be all one continuous city with poor areas and richer areas, and sometimes the rich and the poor areas are all together. And that's cool. If that's what you want to do, do that. But what this system does help with is you not getting overwhelmed when it says, okay, you have to come up with your own city or your own neighborhood for your players to mess around in. You don't have to know what's in every district. You don't have to know what's behind every door. What's inside the wall stays inside the wall, and odds are We're not going there, at least not anytime soon. So you don't have to worry about it. Which takes us outside the wall to the rest of these places where you actually will be playing. So now here's for the real part. We have to talk about what the zone is. And to do that, we kind of have to know a bit about the history of the last cities, right? The Ghost War happened. Bombs. Ghost radiation everywhere. Monsters all over the place. All our infrastructure gone. All our technology gone. Isolated military units trying to reunify the country and ending up clashing with each other in the process by accident, fighting in the dark, shooting blind, right? A few cities became kind of restaging grounds for a lot of these, for the army, for remnants of the old kind of political cabals that ran the countries, and also just natural points where people thought to go. So, like, a good example is Angeltown, formerly Los Angeles. In terrible shape after the Ghost War. Beverly Hills, Hollywood, hit with a ghost bomb, complete radioactive dead zone. Not a lot of natural resources to speak of with, the climate crisis and what have you, flooding as the sea waters rose. And all of these huge billion-dollar industries, like entertainment stuff, not doing anything after the world ended. All the money in these bank accounts, pretty much worthless. But everybody went there anyway because it's LA, and everyone was like, yeah, LA's going to be fine. If the world ends, LA's still going to be there. And so it still is. It's kind of like currency. Like, enough people believed in these cities, and so they, massive bands of these plague or these war refugees, the world's ending, they don't know what's going on, they're fighting their way across the country to make their way to where they believe to be safe zones, right? And usually the military would broadcast it. You had a lot of Walking Dead style shenanigans where groups of people banded together and, formed these, what would eventually become the clans, right? The Waykin, kind of new families made by people along the way. In the book, it says 2/3 of the world population died directly as a cause of the Ghost War. In my headcanon, like at my tables, it's probably closer to 90%. It's kind of hard to quantify. But whether it's 2 in every 3 people, 9 in every 10 people, most people on Earth died. The scared survivors banded together, fought for resources, made their way to these safe zones, and these would eventually become the last cities. The havens were the first secured safe zones for usually the people that were already there. The communities were the places within the walls when the walls were built. The military allowed certain people in. They didn't allow others. They were still scared. They didn't have cures for the diseases, right? They didn't know how twisters worked. Why do some people come and talk to me and they look like my grandma and now they have fangs shooting out of their ribcage? I don't know how that works. What's up with that? Everyone was scared and confused. They built the walls to keep the monsters out. They kind of lost their minds inside the walls. But then on the outsides of the walls, people wanted in. So in the ruins surrounding these cities, because they would build walls around areas of ruined cities and kind of rebuild in there. And all the rest of the ruins on the outside were still abandoned, right? And so all the people making their way to those cities set up shop there. And eventually those numbers grew and grew. And it's a lot like in you think of like a medieval town, right? You would have a castle or a keep with walls, and then people would naturally kind of build their villages and their towns around it because it was an easy, defensible landmark. It was safe. It had authority. It had a sense of order. People naturally kind of congregated around it. And that's exactly what the zones are. The redevelopment zones, or just the zone for short, have kind of become like these makeshift, they're kind of lawless areas. There's so much to say about the zone, right? But effectively, to survive, the people there have kind of commodified themselves and turned themselves into like a resource to be exploited by the last cities, but so that the last cities will take care of them, right? People in the zone don't have workers' rights, don't really have access to lawyers. They are kind of at the mercy of the powers that be. But in return, they'll do all the things that all the other citizens won't. Okay, in the process of struggling to complete this video, I've realized that there's more to say about the zone than can be fit into one video. You can read about it in the book. Alternatively, I'll probably dedicate entire videos to talking about what the zone is and how it works. But in the shortest possible answer, the redevelopment zones are the impoverished communities on the outside of the walls, full of people desperately trying to get back in. Yeah, okay, we're gonna move on now. Next up, we got snap towns. What are snap towns? So one thing that is particularly kind of noteworthy about the world of Geto Ratz is there's no small towns anymore. There's no rural communities, really, at all. It's pretty much entirely urbanized. There would be, kind of more nomadic groups that wander around. You would maybe in certain countries have like smaller communities or certain areas of the world, but for the most part, small towns can't really survive, with one exception. Those would be snap towns. What are snap towns? Snap towns are company towns. They call them snap towns because they aren't there, and then they're there, and then they're gone. They are not long lasting. Think about kind of like gold rush towns and stuff like that. Effectively, a corporation is going to buy up a patch of wasteland. They're going to set up essentially living quarters, light defenses, maybe some more like refining kind of areas and stuff like that. They're going to take a bunch of workers, usually from the zone, workers called scabs, people who take corporate work without being members of a syndicate. They're going to get shipped out to this remote little village with corporate security or possibly mercenaries guarding it. And they're just going to get to work. That could be in mining, it could be in water refining, it could be an oil field, it could be agriculture. Doesn't really matter. Those towns set up, they are pretty much entirely controlled by a corporation. People are paid, again, usually with Unicred or something like that. The costs of shipping them out there and putting them up and feeding them, and medicine if they're injured or anything like that, are taken out of their wages. You work to beat your quota, and hopefully after generally a period of 3 to 8 months, you'll get shipped back home, and hopefully you have a bit of money to show for it. Because it's cheaper generally than taking them down. When a snap town is done, the company will generally just abandon it. So you see a lot of abandoned towns and outposts scattered all over the feedlands that are more recent than, the pre-war ones. Bandits will usually take over. Sometimes highwaymen will set them up as outposts, or maybe the kin will set up shop, or maybe they get overrun by twisters. Who knows? But yeah, those are snap towns. Then you just kind of got the feedlands. The feedlands are... What's to say about the feedlands? They are the endless irradiated wastes inhabited by horrific monsters, violent monsters, aggressive mutants, and all those fun post-apocalyptic things we love. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way... Oh yeah, and I guess here it says camps. Camps, hamlets, etc. Generally, these are going to be outposts for either the Wei Kin or Wild Blood clans, or, it might be smuggling groups, or it might be scavengers or travelers. They might set up small villages, kind of, or little forts and outposts to make navigating the old roads a little bit easier. These kind of evolve into little towns or settlements. But they aren't generally connected to any government or anything like that. They're usually just small collections of people that'll set up in like an old building, or they might build a little compound or something like that up in the mountains or in a valley or whatever. They might, try to survive on their own as long as they can. These places usually get wiped out pretty frequently, and new ones pop up all over the place. Don't have a long shelf life. Okay, so this next little section is kind of the hex crawl portion of it. I'm just going to breeze through this one. So generally speaking, I always do my maps on just pieces of graph paper and stuff like this. This is worth noting, actually. This hex scroll stuff really only applies when you're going to be in the wastelands. When I'm setting up stuff in the zone, I don't bother with this really at all. This is really just for overworld kind of free roaming travel. And that's usually pretty specialized to campaigns that are about that, or quest lines that are about that. So that's why it's such a small section of this book. Is that 9 times out of 10, like, my campaigns never leave the neighborhood they start in, because that's just kind of how I run the zone. That's how I run my games. Everything's very localized, and so you don't usually need rules like this. But if you're doing like a wasteland survival or exploration kind of thing, usually like one-shots and stuff like that, that's what this is for. So in this, it basically says treat every hex or tile as if it's like 3 square kilometers. That's about 1.86 miles, so a little under 2 miles for you Americans. For you Americans out there, that's that in miles. We don't do that here. Yeah, so roughly 1 hour. 1 hour to travel on foot, usually the metric I use. The other thing worth noting is that since twisters are most active at night, it's not that they aren't active during the day, it's that they're most active at night. Rolling and tracking your daylight is super important. You ever play Dying Light? I did, and that's absolutely the vibe I go for in my games. Is everything you have to do, all that traveling, all of that scavenging, all of that good survival stuff, you got to get that done, and you have to be in a safe, secured shelter by the time night comes. Otherwise, you're getting attacked by some of the scariest twisters. Twisters in the zone usually only attack on certain occasions because they got the suicide lights to keep them away. Usually not the scariest ones. The ones that are super irradiated out in the wasteland, horrifying. You don't want to mess with them. Night crawlers, yeah, you don't want to deal with that. So tracking daylight is good. In here it says, 2d6 for hours of daylight each day. That can be good. Could be d6 plus 1, could just be d6. Depends on the region, depends how you're running the game. But make your characters aware of daylight, track daylight. They have to be afraid of nightfall. If they're not afraid of nightfall, this isn't going to be a particularly interesting campaign. So, and it also, with these metrics of like 1 hour travel distance, it makes it a lot easier to stretch out journeys. Like if I have a big map like this, they could travel across it in a few days if they had 24 hours of daylight. If they're traveling in a few hour increments, this could last a whole campaign just to traverse, right? Yeah, okay, so plotting your course. This is just basic hex crawl stuff. If you've played hex crawls, you kind of get it. If you don't, I guess that's the point of this video. Whatever, I don't care. Travel by sunlight, we talked about that. Okay, so the next one is travel modifiers. These are just kind of rough, just a table to help kind of modify your traveling. So what if I'm traveling by vehicle or by boat? What if I'm traveling by train? What if I'm traveling on a paved road or in a wagon or in a large group or in a small group? What if we're a whole army moving? What if we're going underground? What if the terrain is difficult? All those modifiers are there. It's just modifiers to how many hexes per hour or maybe a cost condition to move over hexes or whatever, right? Figure out what works for your game. Lastly, we got travel actions. I'm not even going to touch on these because I expanded on all of them very, very extensively in the expansion, Back Alleys and Black Markets. I updated all of the survival actions. The ones in the book are like serviceable. The ones in Back Alleys and Black Markets are a lot more useful. And if you don't want to pay for that, by the way, you can get it now on DriveThruRPG. And it's pay what you want, so you can get it for free. There's also a free version on the website that doesn't have the artwork or anything like that. It's just like a Word document, so it's easy to print off the rules for that. But yeah, take a look at those. Like, generally this isn't a game where you're doing a lot of hex crawl survival stuff, but if you are, take a look at those. Those are going to help you out. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them in this video, though. If any of my 10 subscribers want a video where I break that down, be the first in this channel's history to leave a comment. Otherwise, I'm not doing it right now. Pray for Day. This is just, fear of nightfall. Nightfall is scary. Be afraid of the night. Next up, we've got the weather. Weather systems. So I like doing weather tables, whether it's in the zone, whether it's in the feedlands. I like randomized weather. I like how it modifies the gameplay. I like that it always gives me a quick shorthand to describe situations or environments. I like that it kind of changes the way everything looks all the time. I like the aesthetics of it, so I use them. I almost always use a 2d6 weather system because I think it's easiest. You could do a d10, you could do a d20, you could do 2d20, you could do a d100. It doesn't matter. I do 2d6 because it's a nice easy number, and it also allows you to have averages where certain weather events are more common versus some weather events are super rare. Whereas a d10, it's going to be equal chance every single time. With the 2d6 system, you know which ones are more likely, you know which ones are going to be rare. So you can plan out your chart accordingly, assign each number a weather event. You can repeat them. I usually don't do repeats because, again, some of them are going to be more common anyway. But yeah, there's just a bunch of examples of weather here. You've got, howling winds, maybe that scare you or creep your character out, dust storms, ash, snow, spores, big clouds of spores clogging the air, neon constellations. Sorry, I hit the camera. Neon constellations where big corporate advertisements light up the sky like stars. Lots of things like that. A glimpse of sunlight, acid rain, blood moons. These are all things that can happen. They all have different effects. You can take a look at them. You can also come up with your own. Okay, so here's the main thing I wanted to actually talk about, which is the exploration and encounter dice. I don't really use these systems anymore. I've kind of changed my mind about them. The exploration dice are for the locations. I actually still use those. So for this, I'll take 2d10s. I'll assign one of them as an adjective, like a descriptor, and the other one a location. This is for when you're doing a hex crawl where you haven't really necessarily prepared a whole lot, and it's more just kind of randomly exploring. I know a lot of you are going to say don't do that and hate that, and that's fine. But when I run games like that, sometimes I like a bit of randomness. So with this table here, and again, modify your table to fit your setting, right? But for just an example table, okay, I got a haunted tower. Okay, cool. Maybe there's an old lighthouse that is, there's a mass grave under it, so it's full of ghosts. That could be cool. Then I got, okay, what's this? Overgrown residence, so a house which has been overgrown with, fungi and plants and vines. For this one, I got a collapsing warehouse. Easy. Just super easy. Put together tables like that. They're tables in the book. Hey, If you want me to release a big book of tables for Geto Ratz, let me know in the comments. I can absolutely make that if there's a demand for it. But I like to keep it simple. 2d6 for weather, 2d10 for buildings and environments and stuff like that. They're super handy to D10 random encounters. I've done random encounters just for my campaigns where I'll usually do D10 daytime encounters, D10 nighttime encounters, or if there's a really prominent, like, busy district in the zone, I might do D10 encounters. So if it's a weekend in the nightlife district, maybe you roll a D10 and, oh, this celebrity showed up or whatever. It doesn't matter. It can help if you don't know what to do or if you are like hungover and trying to run a game and you're like, oh, I don't have anything prepared. They can be a huge saving grace. This game's all about emergent gameplay, so stuff like this helps out a ton. But that takes us to exploration dice and encounter dice. These give you tables for random encounters and for... So for this one here, it gives an example of, like, every time you go from one hex to another hex, the Zone Master rolls. I rolled a 7, nothing happens. Easy enough, right? Roll again, I rolled an 8. Okay, this triggers an encounter. I rolled the danger die, and then, so feed land encounter, I will roll this here. That's a 9. I just did 7, 8, 9. That's funny. 9 is twisters. I don't do this anymore, or I wouldn't do this anymore. It's way too much rolling, and it's way too random. It's okay to do this if you want to. I've done it before, and it was fine. But now, in back alleys and black markets, I introduced a new system. It is called The Hunt. I think I might have talked about it before in the Reputation video. Basically, when you're in the Feedlands, you get a new type of reputation called the Hunt or Hunted or whatever you want to call it, and treat it the same way as Heat or Infamy, only instead of it being at the end of every session, it might be every day. It might be if you fail skill checks while you're doing things like scavenging or salvaging. And it's essentially just a tracker of your party being hunted by monsters and mutants while they're in the Feedlands. Every day, every hour they spend in this environment, it becomes increasingly dangerous to be there. And it is a currency you can then spend to buy encounters. This is good for a lot of reasons. One, tension. Your party knows exactly how much danger they are in at any given time. And it's good, by the way, to treat the hunt not as individual, like each character has their own status of it. Just have it for the whole party. That'll make it way easier. They know exactly how much danger they're in. Generally, your hunted status is going to go down if you are in a town or if you guys are in a secure location to rest. You can wait a few days, it'll slowly go down. Certain things like maybe making your camp in a safe place or moving your camp might lower it. Doesn't mean you can't spend it while they're in town, but, you know, it might go down. But when they're out in those really dangerous areas where you're like, okay, every hex you traverse through this particularly scary section of the map, you're going to get +2 to your hunted status. So they know, okay, there's going to be a lot of combat encounters over there. Whereas, yeah, and that's kind of the idea. If they run up their hunted status really, really high, do you mind? Okay, come over here then if you want to be in the video. Do you want to be in the video or not? Yes? No? Come on. This guy. Okay, yeah, so running up your hunted status, if it gets very, very high, they're gonna know, okay, we're in danger, and you can trigger these really, really big encounters. The best part about it, you can do it as they're traveling for kind of travel encounters, like, you know, their camp is attacked by twisters. Maybe as they're moving from point A to point B, a bunch of bandits ambush them. But you can also do it while they're exploring. So if they're in like a building and they're salvaging for supplies, maybe you spend 2 of their hunted status and there's a bunch of rat hounds in there. Maybe when they go in a basement, a bunch of big hound spiders drop down and try to bite them. It lets you know exactly when you are justified in triggering these encounters. But triggering the encounters is good because then it brings the tension back down. So you don't have to worry about maybe they do this big raid on this dungeon where they get a bunch of loot, they fight a boss, they come out beat up, in shambles, struggling to they barely survived, and they're like, oh my goodness, we did it, we pulled it off. And then they move to the next hex to make their way back, and then it triggers a random encounter with a bunch of coyotes and the party gets wiped. You don't really have to worry about that because you as the zone master are 100% in control of these combat encounters. It's up to you what you think a fair amount is of enemies per point spent. That's kind of irrelevant in my opinion. You know kind of what a fair encounter is going to be. Think of it like heat actions. It's all an abstraction. But I find this works a lot better. So you're not constantly rolling for what they find every time on a hex. Do they randomly get attacked? Do they this, that? You just keep track of... You just keep track of how much danger they're in, and they are very much aware of it the whole time. That's the other thing too. The party knows exactly how much danger they're in, which is equally as fun when they're like, our hunted is at 18. He could spawn in a boss fight at any moment. That's horrifying. What do we want to do, right? Maybe enough gets run up that, you know, the town they're staying in gets attacked by a horde. Maybe their outpost is, you know, overrun or something like that. It's just a much simpler system than tables. I know I just said tables are good. I like them for weather and like generating random buildings and stuff like that. I don't really like using tables for much of anything else. Again, I'll make them if there's something people want, but I find I've realized that when it comes to combat, random combat encounters are generally not the way to go. You can still do it if you can't decide, like, oh, what kinds of enemies should they encounter? I rolled a 5. What's that? Twisters. Look at that. Okay, I rolled... Keep rolling 5s. 3 twisters again. 5 twisters again. 5 twisters again. 4. What's 4? Mutant beasts. You know, whatever. That can be good for that if you want. But, yeah, no. I've switched over to that. Way better. And the other thing, too, is, like, for finding loot and stuff like that. There's a mechanic, too, for scouting where your party can roll to scout out a hex, and then if they do it successfully, they can spend show and be like, oh, can there be, like, some valuable loot here? Or, oh, maybe we discover... And that's how you usually find, like, noteworthy locations. Like, oh, can we find, like, a dungeon to raid, a dungeon to run full of loot and danger and peril? They might spend show for that. Okay, that just takes us to the last one, which is, like, extreme weather events. These are just, like, if you want to really throw a wrench in the plans, having, like, a blizzard roll through. There's a secondary stat for, like, dust storms in the feedlands versus wherever, wildfires, topical. But yeah, stuff like that. And then the last one here is status effects. I actually use these a lot in my zone campaigns too. Things like dehydration and stuff like that, exhaustion. In my game, you have to sleep and drink water and eat because I'm fun and cool like that. And that's the chapter. This is about the worst video I've ever made. But it's kind of from one of those chapters where it's like, if you've played a hex crawl, you know what a hex crawl is. If you haven't played a hex crawl, then I'm sorry. Maybe I can do a better hex scroll video in the future where I actually, maybe we can make a map and I can kind of walk through my process of doing it. What? yeah, anyway, that was the video. Thanks for watching. The next one is going to be better because in the next video we get to talk about the magic system, which is going to make a lot of the stuff in this game make a lot more sense. Thanks for watching. See you around. Later.